The night sky over Sumy lit up like a circuit board. Hundreds of Ukrainian FPVs diving at armored vehicles that couldn't shoot back. On radar, Russian units saw only static. Minutes later, 300 armored platforms, T-90s, BMPs, artillery, were silent. But the real loss came afterward, when Russian commanders tried to explain the unexplainable. In this video, we dive into what they said, and what it reveals about a military on the edge. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Coordinating 1,000 independent drones sounds like a video game fantasy. Yet in the fields east of Sumy, it happened. The operation drew on a web of tools created through countless small experiments across the Ukrainian front in 2024. Instead of a single command station giving orders, software distributed control through multiple nodes, each able to take over if another was jammed or destroyed. Every drone operated on a shared GPS grid, updated in real time through encrypted civilian networks, not military satellites. That system, called Delta Link by operators, stitched commercial mapping data to low-orbit internet nodes, allowing dozens of local teams to guide their sectors without waiting for central clearance. It was not glamorous, but it was fast. Seconds mattered more than hierarchy. Russian analysts expected their electronic warfare shields to repel these waves. On paper, each brigade in the area had enough jamming capacity to disrupt hundreds of radios and GPS channels. But that equipment was built for concentrated signals. It could handle a few coordinated frequencies, not 1,000 fragmentary ones shifting every few milliseconds. When the first swarm crossed the border, the jammers locked up under the noise. Frequencies overlapped, amplifiers overheated, and operators sat staring at static while their instruments blinked red. One command post tried to reboot mid-assault, only to lose control of its own counter-drone network, which began responding to phantom targets created by the overload. The composition of the swarm made the disruption worse. FPV attack drones, cheap quadcopters carrying shaped charges, flew only a few meters above the ground, weaving through trees and power lines. Reconnaissance units climbed just high enough to feed positional data before diving away, handing off coordinates to loitering munitions circling kilometers above. Each type filled a layer. Reconnaissance marked targets, FPVs executed strikes, and loitering drones hunted survivors or reserves moving in. None needed to talk directly. Timing algorithms preloaded before takeoff, matched by shared GPS reference points, allowed them to converge almost simultaneously across a 9-kilometer front. From afar, it looked like random chaos. Inside the grid, it was near perfect orchestration. Tank crews watching their radars saw nothing consistent. Static came first, then bursts of interference that resembled lightning more than combat signals. Escape routes clogged instantly. Vehicles tried to turn out of formation, only to block each other's line of retreat. As the first FPVs hit, ammunition inside hatches ignited, setting off chain reactions. Crews abandoned machines still running. Several armored columns ended up crushed together in ditches because drivers reversed blindly under smoke they thought was friendly cover. Open-source analysts later traced the sequence through drone camera feeds released by Ukrainian units. Timestamps showed coordinated hits within a 2-minute window. Out of 1,000 active craft, around 640 confirmed successful impacts, and about half returned or transmitted final footage before loss of signal. Independent groups cross-checked landmarks with satellite images, identifying destroyed vehicles from thermal signatures left for days afterward. Most of the Ukrainian operators were not regular soldiers. Many were volunteer technicians or gamers trained in short crash courses at regional centers. They built custom rigs using off-the-shelf cameras and modified gaming controllers wired for analog precision. That allowed micro-adjustments at low altitude, giving FPVs the edge in urban and forested zones where conventional controls lag. One operator team managed over 20 drones per person, hopping between video feeds using head-mounted displays, while a lightweight AI filtered live telemetry to rank targets by vulnerability. By the operation's end, roughly 300 armored platforms, tanks, IFVs, and self-propelled guns were disabled or destroyed across that 9-kilometer engagement area, not through massive airstrikes or coordinated artillery fire, but by devices that collectively cost less than a single Russian main battle tank. Yet while Ukraine celebrated the effectiveness of its swarm technology, the real impact unfolded far from the burning fields, deep inside Russian command networks that suddenly had to account for the impossible. When the shooting stopped, Moscow's response wasn't about the drones. It was about disbelief. Command posts in the Sumy sector had gone silent during the strike, leaving higher headquarters in complete blackout. For almost an hour, regional commanders tried to reach their subordinate units over field radios and encrypted channels, but heard only bursts of static. Their backup fiber lines had failed when local substations lost power, and satellite relays were overwhelmed by emergency transmissions from the front. By the time communication reconnected, most armored formations listed as operational had already been lost. On tactical maps, their symbols still appeared green, but the coordinates pointed to plumes of smoke. Inside makeshift control rooms, officers scrambled to verify what they were seeing. Orders went out for reconnaissance drones to confirm losses, but few came back. Some operators reported being jammed by Ukraine's own electronic interference sweeping across the border to disrupt Russian recovery. The real damage, however, wasn't the wreckage. It was the paralysis. Reports from 3 separate brigades contradicted each other, some claiming sabotage, others declaring a mass malfunction of electronic warfare equipment. Each tried to push responsibility upward, hoping someone else would explain why entire companies had disappeared in one coordinated wave. Days later, leaked internal transcripts began circulating through online military channels. They showed senior officers arguing over whether to classify the event as a cyber attack or an act of espionage. One colonel demanded to know why intercepted drone videos were appearing on foreign social media before he even had his after-action summaries. Confusion dominated the conversation. Messages from one command post appeared hours out of sync, leading neighboring units to believe reinforcements were still en route, while the roads ahead were already littered with destroyed tanks. In that fog of miscommunication, some artillery units accidentally fired on retreating convoys they mistook for enemy movements. When Moscow's investigators reviewed the initial damage report, they found more missing pages than filled ones. Several battalion commanders refused to sign their own logs, afraid the paperwork would brand them personally responsible for the loss. Signing meant accepting blame for failed defenses, inadequate maintenance, and ignored alerts from technicians who had warned that radar calibration errors were spreading across the district. The refusal to certify reports stalled the official review for weeks. The destroyed vehicles were already scavenged or burned beyond recovery before the military bureaucracy even established which units they had belonged to. An emergency audit by the Western Military District followed. Inspectors uncovered vehicles listed as combat-ready but missing engines, storage yards marked as full yet containing rusting hulks without optics, and entire shipments of spare parts that existed only on spreadsheets. Readiness logs had been falsified for months to meet quota targets. Maintenance regiments had signed off on repairs that were never completed. Beneath the drone strike's destruction lay a logistical rot that reached deep into the structure itself. Ukraine's decentralized swarm control had worked precisely because no single failure crippled the operation. Russia's command chain, rigid and layered, ensured that any disruption froze everything beneath it. When the communication grid collapsed, every decision bottlenecked at the top. Mid-level officers couldn't adjust tactics without permission that never arrived. Analysts describing the event later noted that within 2 months, several officers tied to the Sumy losses were quietly transferred or relieved. None faced public court-martial. The institution simply absorbed the collapse, pretending it was a temporary anomaly rather than systemic decay. The Sumy strike, for that reason, became less a story of technological surprise and more a reflection of institutional fatigue. While Ukraine's drones moved independently, Russian doctrine demanded that machines, men, and decisions all flow through the same vertical line. Once that line snapped, everything below disintegrated. The aftermath forced even hardened officers to reconsider whether centralized authority could survive against a battlefield that rewards autonomy. And from that question came the next, far more consequential one. What kind of army could adapt before the next swarm arrived? The battle for Sumy proved that strength now depends on information flow. Ukraine's victory came from how fast data moved, not how heavy its weapons were. Systems built for openness and quick reaction outpaced armor designed for rigid command. Modern warfare now favors those who share control instead of guarding it. The next breakthroughs won't come from bigger guns, but from smarter networks that connect soldiers, machines, and decision-makers in real time. Watch closely as Ukraine's decentralized model reshapes doctrines across the world and defines how the next generation will fight, where adaptation decides survival before the first shot.